Thank you for joining the Binge Eating Disorder Association's Weight Stigma Awareness Week 2015 webinar featuring the topic of weight stigma in communities of color. Today we're honored to have Akila Stanfield as our featured webinar guest, and she'll be presenting on Call Me Thick, Weight Stigma, Body Awareness, and Love in Communities of Color. Akila is on an amazing journey to become a healthy woman of God, and through humor, wit, and spiritual striving, she's sharing her journey to health and wellness. In her blog Sanity, she shares the tools, eating plans, workout, and what generally works for her. You also get to meet some of the motivating characters and factors in her life and watch her shift through another place in her journey. Originally from Hampton, Virginia, she holds degrees from both Spelman College and Loyola University, Chicago. She loves seafood, the South, and large bodies of water. Currently, Akila resides in the DC metro area where she serves as an assistant principal. And without further ado, I will pass it off to Akila.
Hello and welcome to the webinar. I am so excited to be here with everyone during BEDA's Weight Stigma Awareness Week. This is an amazing, amazing topic and something that's very dear to my heart. As Elizabeth told you, I will be presenting on weight stigma and body awareness and love, actually, in communities of color. Something that is very much a part of my journey is love, along with the weight stigma and becoming body aware and becoming healthy in my eating habits. And I'm just going to share a little bit of my journey and talk a little bit about how it's affected not only myself, but my community. So a little bit how the format's going to go. So I have a couple of slides, but I'm going to be talking to you mostly, but I will let you know before I want to show you a slide, because it's going to be like a little pause to kind of toggle between screens. And I promise you my slides are not boring. It's not a lot of text. I have pictures, like something I really want you to connect to. And we're going to get started. Just going to come on and enjoy the ride. So I'm about to do one of those toggles now to start the presentation. So just give me 1 second. All right, and so hopefully you all can see that. So again, my presentation is called Call Me Thick, Weight Stigma, Body Awareness, and Love in Communities of Color. And just so you know, so my community of color, of course, is the African American community, or like I like to call us Black women. So a lot of my presentation will focus on that today because that is my community and the story that I'm telling. However, I believe that our stories transcend all of those lines and boundaries, but just so you know, that's where the focus is going to be today. So a little bit about the agenda. So I'm going to give you an introduction to my community of color, so women of color, and just obesity and what that looks like in our community and what type of women we are. An introduction to myself, Akila Stanfield, to kind of like take you on a micro level. So I'm going to start macro, like, you know, these are some statistics about actually a very small part of women of color. Just some things that resonate with me personally, and then kind of tie you into the micro level of like who I am. Then really get into that story of food, feeling, and boys, which is the crux of our presentation, about where I got some of these ideas about my body and food and feelings and all those great things. And then we're going to kind of have a question. Like, I think the question for today is, am I thick or fat? Images of women. I know women of color especially deal with this a lot, and have for a long time. The world as a whole, or the dominant culture as a whole, is now, in the last probably 5 or 7 years, has caught up to the idea of having, you know, a thick backside or a fat backside and things like that. But this is something that we've been dealing with for decades about, you know, I like a thick woman, and is thick fat, and can I be skinny, and all those things that kind of feed into unhealthy habits around food and around how we feel about our bodies. Then we're going to go into a little bit of weight stigma, and it's called No, I Do Not Have Diabetes, which is something that my community deals with a lot. Diabetes is very prevalent in the African American community. However, a stigma that we deal with as women, and that I have definitely faced, is when we go to the doctors, one of the first things they ask us about, if you are overweight. If you're overweight and a Black woman, must have diabetes. It's just an interesting take on it. And then just how I'm moving towards health and how our community is kind of moving towards health. And then we're going to close it out. So just really quickly, going to get through these slides pretty quickly. And I kind of want to go this way first. So I want to start with who we are, who are we as a whole. So again, the community I'm focusing on is, of course, is Black women. And I wanted to really find the stats that kind of shape who I am and who a lot of my friends are and kind of like where we're coming out of. So in the left of the top, you see where it says that 82% of women, of African-American women, and this comes from Dr. Carroll, about 82% of us are obese or overweight. So and that's according to medical standards. So you know that nifty scale the doctor has when they calculate your BMI, and that's a whole nother conversation about exactly if that is even friendly to women of color, but that's something separate. But according to those standards, those are the numbers, as compared to about 63.2% of women who are Caucasian. So it's a big disparity there, about 20%. But so that is something that we're dealing with. Also, if you go to the right, you see a picture of Shonda Rhimes on the cover of the Hollywood Reporter. Black women lead all women in labor force participation rates, so we work a lot. We are also very entrepreneurial, starting businesses at 6 times the national average, and representing the fastest growing segment of women-owned businesses. So that just to say, okay, so we're overweight, we're obese, but then we also are working a lot, owning more than 1 million firms, employing about 272,000 people other than ourselves, and generating an estimated $44.9 billion of revenue. And that's from the Center for American Progress. So that is just an idea that, okay, so we are working and we're not necessarily healthy. Another statistic, if you look at the bottom left, is though all women, yay women, lead their male counterparts in college and enrollment, Black women do so at higher rates than any other group of women in America. So meaning that if you compared like Asian women to Asian men or white women to white men, like Black women to Black men, we have a higher rate of having that degree attainment than our male counterparts within our ethnic group. And this came from 2010, also from the Center for American Progress. And we are making up 66% of all Blacks who finish their bachelor's degrees, 71% of all Blacks who finish with a master's, and 65% of those who have a doctorate. So again, very hardworking. And the last statistic I have is actually a wonderful picture of one of my best friends for her wedding day. That's about 45.2% of Black women have been married at one point. So just the idea, this is where this love comes in, where, okay, so if I think about the statistics that really shape who I am and who I am in my community, these were big to me because I am overweight. I am an entrepreneur. I do have a master's degree, and I absolutely want to be a part of that number of married women. So very much so my story. So then, if you look at who I am within those stats, so I'm a school leader, I'm an assistant principal, so I do work very long hours, and that does tend to affect self-care and healthy eating habits. So kind of falling into that trend, I am a girlfriend, I am a friend, I travel the world, and I'm a daughter. But in the middle of that, you see where I am overweight. And so the question is, how does that overweight status really affect or touch all of these other things that I am? Or on the reverse, how do all those other things that I am affect my overweight status? And that's what we want to explore a little bit today. So we're going to go into now my journey in eating and feelings. And I have all these screenshots of a lot of my blog posts from the HuffPost, and that a lot of them come from my personal blog. These are some of the most popular ones. And eatings and feelings, and the reason why I called it this, what I want to call my journey that, is because, a lot of friends said, Akilah, you're just spilling your feelings all in the air because I'm just writing about my eating, my body, and how I feel. And the one on the left where it says when the man you love asks you to lose weight is probably the most, I don't know if you can call it viral, but that was the most popular piece that I did. And really, when I think about it, I'm like, hey, that is a big part of eating and feelings when you are in love, and how other people feel about your body and what you're going to do about it. So now we're going to toggle back to me, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit. See if we can get this going here. We're going to stop, and I believe I am back. Okay, so a little bit about my story. So I don't know about you guys out there, but I have always been chubby, plump, not quite small. By the time I got to high school, I was actually officially thick, as the boys like to call it, and really veering off into what I would call like a severe obesity state probably right after college, as personal demands on me grew. So as I started getting those degrees and getting into the jobs, like things like that. So I think when I think about my binge eating, mostly, I think about it in stages. So when I was a child, I always knew, I grew up in a household with two parents who were very loving, very successful, very prominent people in my community, who gave me all the love and support I could ever want. But that love and support often came in the form of food. And I think it's because they grew up not really having that freedom to eat whatever they want. And so I grew up in a house where I could, but still feeling that shame around it, because I remember even as a kid, like hiding food and hiding snacks and things like that. And that came more from the love side. And what I mean by that is, even though I had the supportive parents, my mother always reminded me, especially when I hit about 9 or 10, that I needed to watch my weight if I was going to have a husband and have a family. Because men, they don't like their women to be too big, but they want you to have a little meat on your bones, but not too much meat. And so you can imagine, as a preteen, I'm like, what? So I can't be skinny and I can't be fat. I gotta be like this perfect size that a man is gonna want. So I feel totally out of control at that point. And the only thing I could control really was my eating. And so if you kind of fast forward that and kind of go into that adolescent stage and meeting boys and boys liking me for different things. I was smart, I was intelligent, but of course my focus was always on my body. And because of those messages I was getting, I didn't particularly love my body. So I didn't particularly love anyone else loving my body either. So it was a very interesting dichotomy going through adolescence, and then just going through college and trying to deal with knowing that I'm eating more than I should at like one sitting or at certain times, but not really having anyone to talk to about it. And we're gonna talk about that a little later in the presentation, like where, especially in the communities of color, especially in my community of color, where, it's like, girl, just go on a diet. Girl, I mean, you need to go run a mile or something, like, or it's, girl, you just thick, you're fine. And I'm sitting here saying, no, like, I really just ate like 4 pies, like, because I didn't feel good today. So like, and not really having an outlet for that. And then all of these things running into where we're going to really talk about today, running into my, what I like to call like real adulthood. So when I hit like 30, I was like, wait a minute. So I have the degrees, I have the job, all my friends are getting married, I'm overweight, but this is who I am. And so now I want a family and a husband, things like that. Now it's really important to me. And so I had to figure out first how I was going to love me so that I could get someone else to kind of join this party. I didn't think it would start with my body, though. I thought more like, well, maybe I could do some internal work. And I didn't realize that the internal was actually affecting the external. And so I fell in love with a boy, a man actually, and he was the boy from my childhood who I grew up with. And again, not really focusing in on my body at all, like focusing in on other things, like, do I have enough money saved? Have I really gotten over buying Prada shoes anytime I feel like it? And him saying, hey, you know, I've known you since you were like 12. And for the last couple of years, you've been steady putting on weight faster than I've ever seen. Like, what's going on? And me feeling very unloved with that statement, because even though it was a statement of health, it felt like a personal attack on me and who I was, because I saw myself through my body. So if you think back to those messages, if your mother is telling you at a young age, and I mean, I love her and she's wonderful and she's just doing what she thinks is smart, she's telling you, hey, watch what you eat, because you know you got to be a certain size. And then you hear all these messages, and then you're watching TV and music. You're saying, oh my God, if he is saying anything about my body, it must be that I'm not lovable, like I'm not what he needs. And so that became the whole sanity journey, because I was like, oh, I need to lose weight so that I can get married and have the happily ever after. My body must not be good enough. What's going on? And he was in a space where he was like, well, it's not really about your body, it's about your health. And so I went on a year-long journey where I got really comfortable with my body. And I don't know if any of you have done this yet, but if you decide to seriously lose weight, you know, like we have those points where like, you know, I'm going to do it. You get to know your body really, really well. And what I found was, you know what? I have been just dumping things in my body and just eating to like just suppress feelings for so long because of anxiety and things like that. I don't even know how to dig out of this hole. And there was really no one in my community to really talk to about it, because doctors were saying like, you know, okay, well, you need to write down everything you eat and pace, which is good. I mean, that's good advice. And then you have your family and friends who have their own ideas of how you should lose weight. Everybody was just focusing on the dieting, but no one was there to really focus on my internal, like the emotions behind it, like why I was eating and what was going on. And I think for Black women especially, we are not supposed to be complaining about things like having too much food. Like, it's like you have plenty, you have enough. I mean, you hear from different people like, oh, in some countries, like women, the wider their hips are, like that's the more desirable they are. That means they're healthy. That means they're going to bear children. So you hear all these things to the point where you do really want to be thick. Per se, you want to be just accepted. You want your body to be acceptable to your community. And you don't really think about whether or not that's healthy or not. So let's take a look real quick at some of the images that are being fed to us on a daily basis and on how it makes us feel about our bodies in our community. So I'm going to toggle 1 second. So these are a couple of quotes from some prominent people in my community, basically about our bodies. Jill Scott says, I will not be bowed. I have earned every inch of my life. What you see, you cannot touch. And if it's not love and understanding, you are not a part of my village. Therefore, making your attempt to harm me is null. I'm not even delayed. I love and appreciate my body. My style has been graceful. And she made this quote after some pictures of her taking some suggestive pictures were leaked. Her computer was hacked, and she was actually taking pictures of her weight loss journey. So they were nude pictures, and people really had some mean things to say about her because they thought she was fat. Some people thought that she was thick, and they said things. So it really was an interesting dichotomy, like playing out in the media. Sir Mix-a-Lot, from a very famous song, I Like Big Butts, he has one line that says, give me a sister, I can't resist her, red beans and rice, didn't miss her. So again, this idea that I want a woman that's eating a lot, I want a woman's body to look a certain way, I want her to be thick. And Lil Wayne said, I like my girl thick, not just kind of fine. The problem with this kind of thinking in our community is, of course, first of all, we all know at a high level that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and it really should be what you think about yourself that matters. But when we talk about love and relationships, the problem with this is now you have other people placing what they want onto you, and they're creating these terms, and it's confusing to you, especially as an adolescent. And then when you look on TV, this is all you see. So you see all of these images of women of color, and they are all different sizes, but they have all at one time or another been called thick or fat. Okay, Serena Williams just recently, the New York Times had an article that was harshly criticized for basically talking about her body, about her being built like a man, or because she was thicker than her counterparts. Of course, Nicki Minaj, like this idea now that, you know, a big butt, or is her butt real or is it fake, like, you know, and that being thick or that being fat. And Jill Scott and Beyonce, who admittedly goes, you know, depending on whether or not she's on tour or not, like she has to diet a certain way when it's time for her to go back on tour, but she usually likes to be a certain size, which is kind of like the size in this picture, so which she would call thicker. The idea of Kim Kardashian, you know, everyone's obsession with her body. You see Amber Riley in the corner and Gabourey Sidibe, and really in the left hand bottom corner you see the Hottentot Venus, which was Sarah Baartman. And if you don't know this story, just really quick, during the 19th century, Sarah Baartman was found, and you know, of course, at this time Africans were enslaved, but because of her like they liked her body was almost like a piece of science. So they would take her to different museums and different sideshows, and people would just stare and look at her body like she was objectified because her body was so different, because it was, you know, thick or whatever you want to call it. And so even from them, so that idea of objectifying the extra weight and that defining women in my community, like exactly how much weight you have and where that weight is, has caused a lot of stress in our community. And I'm going to toggle back to you. 1 second. And I think I'm back. Okay. And so it's caused a lot of stress in our communities because we don't know when too much is too much or when enough is enough, and we don't really know how to be comfortable in the bodies that we have. And one thing that I really hope for women in my community and in communities of color is that we learn to look within, and we learn to look at the love that we have from ourselves and from our sisters who do love us, to really find the bravery we need to own our bodies and to own whether or not we're thick or fat, and not let it be left to the media or to a man or anything, not even in the name of love. So when I think about love, I think of an action. And if at any time someone is saying that they love you, but you then have to have an unloving view of yourself or do any action out of feeling unloved, then those two things contradict each other. And I'm seeing the weight loss teas in my community. I'm seeing all types of things that people are doing just to drop weight. And just like even listening to my girlfriends, like they want to drop weight for the reason they want to find love. And love starts with us before we can love anyone else. Even with that article, even when I put that article out and I had my blog and it was for a year and people really followed my health journey and my weight went up and down and just going through all of that, the number one question I still get from readers is, well, did you get the guy? And that is always just so baffling to me, because I'm like, wow, like it's not about, did you overcome your emotional eating? Are you still binging? How are you, dealing with the weight coming back on? How are you getting it off? But did you get the guy? And so what I really want for our community is to focus on, did you get healthy? Like, are you okay? All right. Just to shift gears a little bit, I want to shift into that are you healthy part. This is what I talk to my girlfriends about this all the time, and they're also women of color. When we go to the doctor, this is what it's like. Okay, so first of all, as women, you know, sometimes we use our gynecologist as our primary care physician. We just get it all done while we're there. You go in for your annual, they put you on the scale. It's the first thing they do, take your temperature and all of that. If you are above whatever that number says, so for example, I am 5'4". I am supposed to weigh 135 pounds, according to my doctor, to be a normal weight. I am far from 135 pounds. So the first thing they say is, oh, Miss Stanfield, you're overweight. You know, women in your community, you know, in the Black community, diabetes is very prevalent. Have you had a glucose test? Let's have a glucose test. Let's make sure, because you're probably pre-diabetic. It's always the first words I hear. And I'm like, he hasn't even had one conversation with me. And the thing that got me was I have girlfriends who are visibly much smaller than me, and girlfriends that are visibly more larger than me, who say if their number doesn't hit right around that area, they get the same conversation. And so I was like, you know, like diabetes is a serious thing, but it's not just about being overweight and being an African-American woman. It could be about other things. Like, why doesn't my doctor ask me, well, tell me about your eating habits? Like, what's going on? Like, when do you eat? How much do you eat when you sit down? Like, how are you feeling when you eat? Like, not that he has to be a full psychologist, but there are other questions to ask, because like a lot of people don't find this very true, but whether it's anorexia, bulimia, binge eating, all of those are real medical disorders. And especially in my community, that needs to be touted. People need to know that it is a medical condition and that you can get help. And if you can't, and diabetes is not the only thing that you can catch if you're a Black woman and overweight. There are other things that can be at play. So I want to show you something really quick, which is like one of my favorite things in the world. I'm going to toggle. This amazing woman is Tiffany Holmes. She is one of my best friends. I call her my sister friend. And she's in Chicago. She is the CEO of Total Transformation Weight Loss Coaching. And actually, I think it's Total Transformation Wellness Coaching. I'm sorry. Tiffany has lost well over 120 pounds. And she decided to quit her very lucrative job and to go into wellness coaching. And she tells me one of the hardest things, one of the biggest things or barriers she hits, a lot of times she tells people what she does, is people look at her and they're like, well, you're not small. But she is extremely healthy. She is extremely in shape. I dare anyone half her size to challenge her to like a rigorous mutter race or a 10K or something like that. Like, she is a beast. And so the title of this is Weight Stigma, No, I Don't Have Diabetes, because she is one of the ones that I talk about a lot with that. It was like, no, I don't have any of that. I am healthy in my body. This just happens to be my body. But what I can help you do, she always says, is I can help you stop eating because you don't feel good. And it's that, or because you're stressed. So again, like in our community, you saw the stats, like we are knocking it out of the park, especially compared to our male counterparts. And we have a lot on us. And sometimes the way we relieve that comes through food and stress. And if we don't know what to look for when we're overeating or undereating, and we're just focusing on our body and what our body looks like, a lot of times we can miss the help that we need. And so I always tell people just to remember Tiffany, because she is probably one of the healthiest, most in shape women you will ever meet, but she doesn't look like the standard person that they would put on the cover of Self magazine. She is gorgeous and she is in shape and she can help anyone get to where they need to go. But just looking at her, you might not see that. And I'm going to toggle back to you. And I actually, I'll just go ahead and show you my last slides on the toggle anymore. It'll be easier that way, because we're going to move into moving towards health. So the last thing that I did just last month actually was something called Failure Lab. And it's a move towards health. And it was one of the hardest things I ever did, because I had to talk about my failure. I had to talk about losing, almost 100 pounds and gaining it and a couple more back, and having to come up with plan B for my health. And I told them that night that it wasn't, about, a lot of people got the answer they wanted that night. I did get the guy. But it wasn't about getting smaller, or anything like that. It was more about, oh my gosh, like, I want to be here for my kids. I want to be, and I knew that I was not as healthy as I could because I was feeling it. And so moving towards health looks different for everyone. The reason why I wanted to show you this slide is because failure happens, and it happens on a daily basis. And a lot of times failure, I found, for me especially, is the trigger to over or emotional eating. Some type of feeling of failure or some anxiety around the fact that you might fail. But what if moving towards health was really about accepting the failure and figuring out what's next without overeating or starving ourselves or doing any of those things, without taking it out on our bodies? Actually looking at the failure, figuring out what we can do next, and actually being good to our bodies. And I'm going to toggle back to me. Okay, I think I'm back. And so that evening I shared with, hundreds of people that I was going to have weight loss surgery because of my health. And it was very important to me for the crowd to know, and for the world, whoever read about it, to know that it was not about me not being proud of my body. It was not about what someone else said about my body. It's an internal battle. Emotional eating is something that I deal with every single day. So it wasn't even about that. It was really about having another tool in my toolbox so that I could move towards health. What I would ask everyone who's on this webinar to do tonight is to think about where you are in your life and in your community, and think about, are you as healthy as you can be? Do you have someone to talk to when things get stressful? What do you do when you fail? What do you think about your body? Those questions, and really try to journal it out or get deep into it. Figure out what's going on so that you can move towards health, because your answer it might not be like mine, but you should get an answer, and you should feel the success of knowing that you are actually moving towards a healthy place in your life. You're actually moving towards a good relationship with food and with your body. So in our community, a lot of times it's okay, I'll put that in air quotes, to be thick or to be overweight, and that a lot of times that's what you think you need to get love, or to be less thick or less overweight to get love. But what it's really about is to be loving to yourself so that you can attract love. And I promise you, loving yourself looks different on everyone. It's not one size, it's not one shape, it's not one weight, it's not one height. It is about who you are, the best of who you are, coming out and being present and being visible to everyone who sees your body. So that is all I have for you this evening. I believe that I'll be tweeting later or things like that, and we can talk more about my story or more about your story, or if you're dealing with binge eating or any body awareness issues where you can get some help or someone to talk to. But for now, you can always just tweet me at Queen of Sanity, and I would love to hear from you. Until then, have a great evening.
Thank you so much, Akila. That was amazing. The entire presentation was so informative, and it brought up some questions. Would you mind if we did just a little bit of Q&A before we sign off?
Sure.
Yay! So knowing that you have an understanding of binge eating disorder, I was curious to see what you would consider good advice for people who have binge eating disorder and know that dieting may be triggering to them, but they also don't have the body that's been so idealized with either African American community or any community for that matter. If somebody's not happy with their body and they have binge eating disorder, how do you talk to them about the reality of loving themselves where they're at?
So I usually start with and I know it's hard, but I always say, so first thing, I think you need a journal. You need to write so you can reflect. And what you need to reflect on is, what do you love about yourself, and start there and then kind of work backwards towards the food. So I know with me, it was hard because it was exactly what you're saying. Like, I don't like my body. The dieting was triggering the binging because you kind of you're depraved and then you just eat until you can't eat anymore. And it's kind of like this vicious cycle. It came to a point where I had to literally look at what I loved about myself first, and then what I didn't love, and what was actually triggering those feelings of me not liking my body. And 9 times, I'll even say 9.9 times out of 10, it was a lie. It was some lie or some myth that I believed or that I had internalized that I needed to dismiss. And the only way that I could really do that was by writing it down and actually going step by step. So that was kind of like the first internal part. And then the second part was like some accountability. So after I got to that point where it was like, okay, like I know what's triggering the binges. I know that this is causing me to not be in a healthy place internally or physically, then I really did get some medical help. I think that's the second thing. I think a lot of people don't think that they can actually go to a therapist or to a doctor and actually talk about this and get some good strategies around how to have a healthy relationship with food.
I love the story about your friend who is the wellness coach. Those photos were amazing. She's so beautiful. I really want one of those dresses. That aside, when you're talking to people, especially, let's say, adolescent girls who are navigating the space between the ideal shape in whichever community they're in, if it's African American or if they're trending more toward the Caucasian body type that's idealized, neither of which are often realistic. How do you speak to these developing minds about where their body's going to go and trying to create a space with some critical media skills? Or understanding what body development over the long run looks like.
So, and being an assistant principal, I'm dealing with a lot of those preteens and things every day. And these are conversations that surprisingly at 10, 11, they are ready to have them and they are having these issues. And one of the big things that I like to talk to girls about is because they do have the women in the shapes that they idealize, even at that age, and like they want to look like that when they get older. But we talk a lot at that age about is it real? We talk about reality. So what does it take? I like to give them real information. This is a magazine. This person has a team of people before, during, and after to make them look exactly like this. And if you saw them on the street, they might not look like that. I also like to make sure that there are lots of images. So especially for parents, if you have young girls, I think that's really important, is that there are lots of images in the homes. Kind of watch what they're reading, what they're listening to. I know you can't control it all, but you can make sure there are positive things in your house. So even that one slide I had where it said, am I thick or am I fat? All those women at one point or another were called beautiful or fat or thick or whatever. So it was there was no one way. And I think it's important for girls to see that too. It's not just one standard or one way. You can look all these different ways and be all these different things. What really matters is what you call yourself. and what you think about yourself. And that helps too. That kind of gets into thinking. I'm like, no one looks the same. Not even the women that we deem beautiful, not even the women we deem fat or thick or whatever. So like, who are you? Like, that's really up to you. And at that age, they kind of understand it. It's very interesting. They're funny conversations a lot, but yeah, even at 10 or 11, they're ready to have it.
Okay, then last question, which dovetails really well into the position that you have in your community, which I'm so glad you're there to give guidance to these growing minds, deals with eating disorders. It's kind of understood that in the African American community, eating disorders are either a taboo topic, or they're not really considered as serious and life-threatening a problem as they can be. How do you tackle that with these growing minds and or with parents of people that you think might be in jeopardy?
One thing I have to say, I have to give kudos to our First Lady, Michelle Obama, with her Let's Move campaign and talking about obesity, and her being an African-American woman. That was huge. Honestly, just the idea, and not necessarily the focus on the negative at first, but the focus on what you can do to be healthy. So like eating well and moving and things like that. And, you know, coming to our schools, even in DC, and having those campaigns and working out with our kids, like that was huge. So that's big. That's one thing. The second thing with our community around, so it's really a broader issue. Like, I mean, if I had all night, like, you know, like it's an issue around mental health as a whole in our community, and it not being taboo and it not being stigmatized. So I think the best thing now is like, even now, like our school nurse, she does little sessions about body awareness and about like, you know, eating healthy and like what it can look like. You know, we have like those little stories about, you know, Maisie is throwing up. Like, what does that mean? Or like, cause you see those behaviors early, actually, like they start earlier and earlier, even in preteen. So actually having those conversations like, hey, like, this is a danger zone. Like, this is a problem. Like, you can come talk to a medical professional. Like, it's not taboo, it's not a problem. So having the nurses in the schools, and another big thing I think is having more doctors or psychologists in our community to kind of come out and speak out about the fact. I think, so we hear about anorexia, we hear about bulimia, and those are like big ones. And I know even with the stigma, the idea that that's a white girl's disease or something like that, when actually Black women deal with it a lot. But people don't really deal with binge eating as much. Like, it is like binge eating is an eating disorder. Like, this is it's serious, and you can get help. And I think in our community more so, the idea that they're just thinking about, well, you're just eating too much. Like, stop eating. Like, don't eat the ribs, don't eat the yams, don't eat the ham hocks or whatever. But it's an emotional thing. And I think because we have a disparity in mental health as a whole in our community, then that kind of gets the short end of the stick, definitely. So I don't know. I think it does have to come more, like, it does have to be more campaigns, like from like someone like the First Lady, but I think also like doctors in our community could get out more and really talk to people about healthy body habits and healthy eating habits, and what they can do, not only just for the kids, but for themselves.
This has been amazing. I am truly so thankful that you have taken the time to share your experience within your community, our community. I live here in DC with you, so it's I feel like it's our community. Yeah. For more information on Weight Stigma Awareness Week, please go to bedaonline.com and click on the tab that says Events and Forum, and then on WASA, WSAW 2015. The agenda will give you further details about tweet chats and other webinars that we're going to be hosting, blog posts that are going to be coming up daily, each especially written for BEDA by members of each of the communities that we're featuring all week. And don't forget, if you'd like information about BEDA or attending the upcoming BEDA 2015 conference, please go to http://members.bedaonline.com. Our conference is being held in Hollywood, Florida this year between the 5th and 7th of November, and we still have early bird rates in place until the end of Weight Stigma Awareness Week, so that will be Friday the 25th. Thank you, Akila. Thank you so much for your time. And I will look forward to staying in touch with you. And thank you all for joining us for this webinar. We at BEDA look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Thank you.